welcome to Get Fruitful Conversations. I'm your host, Anwen Cooper, and if you're interested in growing a passion-fueled, purpose-driven enterprise and believe that business can be a force for greater good, then this is the podcast for you. Each episode, I'll be talking with inspiring entrepreneurs and inviting them to share how they're pioneering new ways of working to create more prosperity and positive impact for people and the planet. We'll be bringing you fresh insight and practical actions to generate more income and impact through your own business. Our purpose is to give you new perspectives on how to align your vision to a bigger mission in a way that fulfills your personal potential while also generating a longer lasting legacy and more value for all. So thanks for tuning in. I'm delighted you're here to listen. Now let's get fruitful with today's conversation. So my guest today is Jenny Kitchen, CEO at Yo-Yo, creative digital agency that prides itself on delivering experiences with impact. And Jenny's business is recently become a registered BCorp. They are also an Umbraco Gold Partner, certified site core solution partner, and specialist in disruptive technology, working with things like AR, VR, voice, and other exciting technologies. And Yo-Yo have worked with some really big brands, including JP Morgan, Smiths Medical, Mercedes-Benz, Marie Curie, and Universal Music. And Jenny is a really inspiring leader. Really excited to be speaking to her today. She's won some awards for her leadership and entrepreneurship. She's also a strong advocate for building sustainable business and prioritizing people and the planet alongside profit. She's been working at Yo-Yo for 10 years now. And prior to that, she started off with a degree and actually has 2 degrees, which I think is very impressive. So her first BA was in linguistics, and she then went on to get another degree in psychology. And she's become a chartered marketer along the way with the Chartered Institute of Marketing, as well as doing a number of other qualifications. And she's also a mental health first aider, which I think is a really valuable certification. But yeah, most recently has taken her business through the process to become registered as a B Corp, and that's something that we're going to be talking about a lot today. So please welcome Jenny. Thanks for joining me, Jenny.
Thanks for having me.
So obviously the theme of these conversations is all about how people can use their businesses as a force for good. And that's something that I know you're really passionate about and you've been doing lots towards. So I want to just kick off with that question and ask you a bit about what business as a force for good means for you and Yo-Yo.
Good question, good place to start. I think it's always a really interesting one because especially when I started working with my business partner, Greg, 10 years ago, then at the time, the kind of idea of business as a force for good felt always a bit fluffy. Because what do you say to that? I think we did a brand strategy piece once. And it's like, well, we're just the good guys. We do good things. But that doesn't feel very commercial. It doesn't feel very sort of in line with business corporates and the sort of leaders that I guess I looked up to in the past. But that has definitely changed over the last sort of 5, 6, 7 years, I'd say. And it's become much more sort of acceptable to stand up to say, you can actually strive for profit without being an idiot, without being just focused on the money side of things. You can do that whilst also considering the people and the impact that you have on the planet and actually striving for more in the world as opposed to just striving for money. And so actually, I mean, the whole B Corp journey has been incredible for us because it has meant that it's a framework. It's a framework where we can not only sort of understand where we fit on the sort of scale of sustainable business, but also learn from the community and constantly sort of be evolving our business in different ways. And once you start getting into this space and understanding what impact you can have, then it's kind of never ending. There are so many different parts to this sort of puzzle. And of course, alongside all of it, you need to be making profit as a business. We need to be making money in order to do all of the things that we want to achieve. And so that's never been forgotten. But it's all of those elements around how to empower people, how to make them feel autonomous, how to be able to live their lives alongside work, so the personal side doesn't suffer, whether that's sort of stress or paternity, maternity, whether it's what they want to achieve in their lives. So we focus a lot on learning and development, or we focus on mental health and making sure that people are sort of well looked after. We focus a lot on openness and transparency, and again making sure that people have that sort of autonomy. But then on the other side, on the sort of environmental side, then it's how can we be as good as possible and minimize the impact that we have on the world. So there's kind of simple things around becoming a paperless office, or looking at your energy consumption, reducing travel, but also other things like at the moment we're changing our bank. There are much better banking kind of companies out there that have less impact on the planet and do more for people and the sort of world around us. So it's just having kind of, I guess, using business as a force for good. I'm not saying we're whiter than white at all, we're really not, but it's a constant journey to kind of every week, every month, just reflecting in and saying, well, how can we be better? Is there a better way of doing it? And actually through that innovation and ideas, we actually create a better business as a result, one that sometimes doesn't, people can be worried that it costs more to use environmentally friendly cleaning products. Then sometimes it does cost a little bit more, but actually there are other hidden benefits, or not necessarily that hidden, but whereby we spend less on recruitment fees because we attract people who want to work with a company that puts sort of purpose ahead, or at least alongside profit. So
really
it's not clear.
It balances out probably, or perhaps there's an overall saving. So I'm really interested to hear a little bit more about your B Corp journey. I'm sure there's a lot you could say, and obviously it's been quite a long process for you to go through that. But would you just share sort of briefly in a nutshell for people who don't know what B Corp is, what is it? Why did you want to go through that process of registering, and what was it like to go through it? What's involved?
So B Corp itself, it's a framework, it's a community, it's assessment basically, whereby businesses go through a period of sort of basically asking a bunch of questions. You need to get 80 out of 200, and those are all sorts of different things. There's 5 sections to it, around governance and how you run the business, around customers, around the supply chain, and sort of the impact that your supply chain has on the planet and the world, your workers, the people, and the environment itself. So all of the questions are sort of divided up into those areas. And that's what I mean about we're certainly not whiter than white, and B Corp companies aren't necessarily doing all of that. And that's the whole part of it. You don't need to be absolutely at the top of the game for everything. It's just, you need to be doing a certain amount, a certain level of things across the organization. And so you go through that process. It's quite lengthy, and there's quite a lot involved in it, but I guess that's the benefit of it. It's not just a simple tick box exercise for then companies to turn around and say, yes, we're sustainable. It's really in depth, and we and other B Corp, we change our whole businesses around this. It's not, the stuff isn't necessarily kind of foreign to us, but there is still a hell of a lot of work to do to make sure that every single aspect is make sure as many aspects as possible are sort of ticked. So you go through that. That's about sort of 3 or 4 months. We did it in about 3 or 4 months, but that was because we were doing a lot of late nights, and I really pushed us a lot around it. I wouldn't recommend it. I would recommend giving yourself 6 months at a minimum. But many spend sort of 6 to 12 months. It depends on the size of the organization and the complexity of the business. But then you're assessed by the B Corp team, and you have to prove all the different sort of aspects, whether that's taking a picture of the recycling systems that you've got in the business, or submitting your policies around the employee benefits, for instance. So it's about sort of, proving all of this aspect, and then you get accredited, hopefully, if you pass. And it's a group of about, I think there's about 4,000 businesses now across the world, maybe a few more now. But over the last year especially, I think the UK is just absolutely waking up to this, and they are inundated at the moment. And there's quite a long waiting list. We're
really a waiting list. Wow.
We're quite involved with BCorp. We're currently redesigning their website and doing the certification process and things like that. And just knowing, they're working so incredibly hard to that they're shocked almost about
they're a massive success story.
The absolute explosion over the last year. I think the pandemic has definitely meant that businesses are just reassessing. People are reassessing. What there must be more to life than just endless growth and money searching. So I think it's a really interesting time.
Yeah, fascinating. So I want you to share a little bit about what you've learned along the way, not just going through the BCorp registration process, but just in your 10 years working with Yo-Yo, but also through your career to this point. What would you say are the biggest lessons you've learned in business, and how that relates to business as a force for good?
I think over the years, I've either realized how little I do know or become more confident in vulnerability, to be able to say, actually, I don't know, or no, I'm not the best person to ask. I'm one person, and I research a lot, I learn a lot, I talk to a lot of people. But of course, I know this about business in comparison to sort of, once there's 25 of us in the business. If we pull together kind of all of our thoughts and all of the things that we know, then it's far better for other people to make decisions across the business as opposed to just me. And so I think the lesson is kind of, there's several different parts to that. It's being comfortable and confident to say, I don't know, what do you think? It's also having a strong sort of framework or system in place across an organization to be able to empower others to make decisions. And so there's different ways of doing it, that sort of formal project management style of sort of creating RACIs of who's responsible for this, who's accountable for this, who should be kind of informed. Or there's just more of a kind of understanding between people for me to just say, this is not my decision to make, you make that decision. And just being very comfortable sort of around that. And then in the same way, listening more than you talk. Again, I thought that sort of CEOs and MDs and leaders needed to be the ones always kind of having the answers. And again, it's just not the case, and actually empowering and lifting up people. And that's how I get inspiration from others, and from seeing them grow and develop in their careers and pushing them more to the forefront as opposed to myself. I definitely get a kick from that. I think kind of the other element, which I sort of learned really early on, I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do, but I thought I wanted to run a business. And so when I left university, then I enrolled in CIMA, management accountancy, a Chartered Institute of Management Accountants, and did quite a few financial courses. And I've always just been very interested in finance. And I think every business owner, every leader has to have a certain level of financial understanding. You just need to know your numbers. Need to be able to kind of, understand all the different aspects and all the different levers that you can push and pull in order to make sure that you have that kind of financial security. And so we've always run the business sort of in a fairly cautious way when it comes to finance, always making sure that we have good amount of savings, invest in the right area and things like that. So I definitely say finance training early doors is key. And then the last one, it sounds a bit soppy, but kindness. Just be kind, just give yourself a break. And lots of leaders, talking to a friend of mine actually over the weekend, works for a large global corporate. And we were talking about how a lot of businesses give lip service to perfection, and how perfection is evil. And actually we have a sort of fail fast kind of culture. And a lot of companies, it's just not true. You know, they really do try and seek out absolute perfection all the time. And don't allow for those mistakes to happen. And then for the kindness to come in to say, that's okay, that's how we learn. And so, yeah, that element of kindness, I think, is really key when it comes to leadership.
Yeah, absolutely. So you talked a little bit there about what inspires you and what you enjoy about what you do. I was interested to hear a bit more about what motivates you, kind of what gets you out of bed in the morning, what are you working towards, and yeah, what do you feel is the purpose that drives you in business?
So definitely the sort of the people side. That has always, I've always been, people pleaser has always been a quite a negative term, but do you know what? I'm going to own that. I'm going to own it. And that has always kind of inspired me, whether that's sort of our clients and that customer service that we create, or whether it's the team and the experience that they have working at Yo-Yo. And that was always sort of part of our strategy from sort of day one, is kind of creating somewhere where people love coming to work. And so that people piece has always been a huge inspiration, I guess, point for me. From the actual work itself, like, I am a problem solver, and I love a big blank sheet of paper where there's just a problem statement, and that's where I work with our clients in the most enjoyable way for me, which is good because they get lots of benefit from it. But it's a huge benefit. It's a huge sort of motivator for me to have a problem whereby, say, you know, where traffic is down, what do we do? How do we create and how do we get leads? How do we increase revenue? How do we increase donations? How do we create a culture of innovation? Those are the types of things that I love to I don't know, I love solving those, and I love having that blank slate to then get all of the team together and kind of brainstorm it in different ways and actually interact with the team, UX, design, development, project management, sort of strategy and things, and for us to problem solve it all in that way. My brain is less focused on the detail, if I'm honest. Once it kind of gets to that point, then we've got a fantastic team of actually sort of project management who will see it through to the end. But I'm definitely that sort of blank slate kind of thinker, and that's what inspires me.
Brilliant.
And I guess, well, the other aspect is the sustainability side. It's given me such a amazing kind of structure around my life of just feeling like I'm taking action. You know, there's a lot of talk at the moment. Well, there has been a lot of talk for a long time, but that sort of eco-anxiety piece that I think a lot of people are experiencing right now, of just actually the world is a bit of a scary book, can be seen to be a bit of a scary place, and there's a lot that we need to do in order to make it better, if that's even achievable. But I think the way that things that sort of inspire me is always just the action, and knowing that there is action being taken. Otherwise, I sort of that anxiety can build up. And so that's the part that, as I mentioned before, sort of weekly, monthly, just reflecting and just saying, how can we be better? How can we be better at all times? And how can we do less damage? So whether that's developing sort of green hosting solutions, or we're sort of carbon neutral right now, and, you know, absolutely reducing our emissions as much as possible, but then working with partners to plant trees or to work with different communities around the world to sort of offset any of the damage that we're doing. It's not perfect, you know, ideally you wouldn't create anything to offset. But that's unrealistic in itself. But it's about reducing it down and then offsetting. So that's also what inspires me to kind of every day to sort of try and keep getting better and better.
Yeah, fantastic. So if you wanted to share some words of wisdom or top tips or advice for other people who are either thinking about starting a business or already running a business, who want to make their business a greater force for good? What would you like to say to them?
I've mentioned it already, but I think it's sort of worth reiterating here, is sort of sometimes it can feel like it's a really huge mountain to climb, and you don't need to be whiter than white. And it's about kind of doing those small kind of incremental steps and just focusing in. B Corp, I'm a B Corp ambassador. I'm a huge advocate of it as a system. But of course, there are others out there, and actually having something that you're almost working through is really helpful. So then you don't feel sort of too alone with it all. And there's lots of great books. Green Giants. I can't remember who wrote that actually, but Green Giants is a fantastic book to, again, just get inspired.
You think of the sweet corn.
I know, exactly. That's just it. But it's looking at all sort of major companies across the world and how they use business for good.
Mm-hmm.
So again, it provides a really good sort of stimulus and interesting topics in there. I think kind of not necessarily specifically with business for good, but just in general, then I think, again, reflecting often is really useful. So sometimes we've had it in the business where we're running at something, and we don't have the time to sit back.
Yeah.
Actually, we're running towards the right goal. Are we running towards the thing that is going to make a big difference to our lives, the team's life, the client's lives? So that whole point around like know and understand why you're growing is really important. You know, I've grown up thinking that businesses are successful if they are mammoth, you know, if they're constantly growing, more profit, more revenue. But actually, you know, again, that reflection piece of why. And I've always said to the team, and myself and my business partner have always talked about it in a way of, we want to grow because we want to be able to achieve all these different elements, and we need growth to do that.
Yeah.
But we care so much about the culture and what we've created that if we can't protect that, we don't want to grow. So it's that balance of just don't just seek growth at all costs.
Yeah.
Because I know several business owners that have grown and then come and go, I'm not happy. The team's not happy. The product is failing. You know, so figure out
compromise on their values or compromise on their vision.
That's it.
Burnout.
Exactly,
Yeah.
and just you mentioned sort of burnout and things, and it is mental health is just such a huge aspect. And I'm a mental health first aid trainer. We've got a counsellor who's on the books, so any of the team can go to that person sort of whenever they need, anonymously, and we talk about it a lot in the business. But as I'm sure you know, because you work with lots of different companies, but teams are really suffering and leaders are really suffering, and there is a really difficult piece around this of actually how do we all protect ourselves and get ourselves sort of physically and mentally sort of well. And that's, you know, there is only a certain amount that businesses can do, but if there are kind of, you know, just stress, exercise, sleep, rest, all of those sorts of different things, if businesses and business leaders can encourage that, but as well encourage it on themselves.
Setting a good example.
Exactly. Yeah. It's really critical.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, thank you. We're going to have to wrap up in a moment because we're nearly out of time, but before we go, I'd just like to ask you to share your contact details in a moment. And before that, just anything else that you're working towards at the moment? Kind of what are your big plans for the future? What does the next step look like for you?
Interesting. For me, we've been building up to the point that we're in right now for a little while in terms of the business structure. We had, just before we went live, you and I were sort of just chatting about the fact that last year, the last 18 months, have been a bit of a roller coaster, as it has for most businesses. But actually, we've really stabilized over the last 6 months, and we're growing at a really good rate in the way that we want to grow. And so really what ideally I would like it is for the business to double, potentially even treble. And at that point, I would like to explore employee ownership and sort of change the structure of the organization so it's governed in a different way.
Right.
And then at that point, I think probably more around sustainability consultancy and looking at sort of how I help out other businesses.
You've got so much to share from your own experience.
I think that's it, and it's something that, don't get me wrong, I absolutely love everything that I do right now, but that's definitely a niche in the future. Yeah,
brilliant. Well, thank you. So before we go, please do let us know, how can people get in touch if they want to know more about you or Yo-Yo?
Well, ironically, I had a couple of drinks the other night. I managed to, or not managed to, I was very angry at Zuckerberg, and so I've managed to delete Facebook and Instagram.
Wow. You're one of those people. I feel like that's a growing movement at the moment.
And I'm like, I've lost all my photos.
Oh, no.
But yeah, there's a bit of a smugness to it. But no, I'm out of that. But LinkedIn, so LinkedIn, Jenny Kitchen, and also my email address is jenny@yoyodesign.com, and our URL www.yoyodesign.com. So get in contact with me in any way, and whether it's sort of leadership, entrepreneurship, sustainable leadership, then happy to have conversations with anyone.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, thank you again for your time and sharing your journey. It's been really great to speak with you today.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me on.
Thanks for listening in to today's Get Fruitful Conversation. If you've enjoyed what you've heard, I invite you to give us a 5-star rating, leave a review, subscribe to the podcast, and tell your friends and colleagues to check it out too. This will help us reach a wider audience and make sure you don't miss out on future episodes. If you'd like to get in touch, connect with other like-minded people in business, and continue conversations about topics discussed here, then I'd love you to come and find our community online. It's free to join us. Just search for the Get Fruitful Business for Good group over on Facebook, visit my website, getfruitfulmarketing.com, or click the links in the show notes. I'd love to hear what Business for Good means for you. Until next time, goodbye for now.